All right, I love it. Thanks so much, Chrissy Van. And of course, more Weather IQ, head to theweathernetwork.com. Now, let's jump into this. Two of our major weather stories. That's the rain happening out in BC and the rain also happening throughout Newfoundland. So both of the coasts dealing with some rain today. Now, let's jump into the 19th confirmed tornado in Ontario. It was confirmed yesterday, happened on Monday. That was in Sheffield. That's just outside of Cambridge. So an EF1. And of course, if you want to read more on that, see Mark Robinson's interviews. He was there sort of assessing some of the damage, putting our eyes on the ground. Head to theweathernetwork.com for more on that story. Very gusty winds throughout Ontario yesterday. Peak wind gusts, look at that. Kingston got up to 80 kilometers an hour. Not good if it was your garbage day. It was my garbage day. Everything was sort of flying around everywhere. Now, let's talk about this. This is what you want to hear about. Your forecast for the long weekend. Yes, it's here. Cool temperatures out through eastern Canada. We'll talk more about that in the Long Ranger, so stay with us for more on that. And then as we take a look at Sunday, that's when we are seeing some wet weather building for the BC coast and then some more rain moving in towards southern Ontario. We'll break down all of those stories right here on the Weather Network. Well, I'm so glad you're here and you've tuned into the Weather Network because we're talking about our developing stories right now. Let's take a look at this. Winds dominate across Canada. We'll tell you some of the peak wind gusts and also hurricane season weakest in decades. We're talking about the Atlantic hurricane season, of course, and then Thanksgiving weekend. We'll get all of that forecast to you right here, right now. Okay, let's take a look at this. We see a lot of the moisture coming in towards the BC coast. Rain on the Pacific coast. Also, we're dealing with rain out towards the Atlantic coast as well. That's out through Newfoundland. A drizzly day as we make it through Thursday. Now, taking a look across the prairies, high pressure is in place, so we're not seeing too much in the way of any moisture. But as we take a look at some of those winds, that's really developing now on the BC coast. So very strong wind gusts up to around 60 kilometers an hour. But let me show you Waterloo, Ontario, some of the conditions that we were dealing with. Take a look at Kingston, 80 kilometers an hour. I live in Mississauga. It was garbage day yesterday. With these kind of wind gusts, yeah, everything was flying around everywhere. So it wasn't the best conditions if it was garbage day for you as well. Now, as we take a look at today, we are still seeing those gusty winds. The winds are coming out of the west, and as they blow over the Georgian Bay, that could be producing some lake effect showers. We dealt with that yesterday. Could be the same scenario yet again today. Nothing huge in the way of moisture, but again, just watching for those lake effect showers. Now, let me take you into Nova Scotia. You're definitely worth a trip out there. Now, as we take a look at this, we see again those gusty winds coming out of the west. Notice these ones, though, more out of the south, and that's actually bringing some warmer conditions throughout Newfoundland. But notice the cold front. Along the cold front, that's where we're going to be seeing the rain throughout the day today into the afternoon, tapering off through the overnight. Now, associated with this cold front, we could be seeing some very weak thunderstorms. There is a slight chance of seeing that throughout the day today, but more it's just going to be that drizzly rain on and off showers. So not the best forecast for your Thursday. Throughout the Maritime province, though, staying fairly dry. Now, we also have to point out this, a storm surge warning. That's along the St. Lawrence. Last week, actually, I took a ferry out of St. Simeon down in towards Rivière-du-Loup. Calm conditions, but with a storm surge warning like this, I could imagine very rough out on the waters. We're dealing with a storm surge warning. And also this, have you ever heard of a king tide? Special weather statement here. And this is the highest tide, the strongest tide, and that's all because of the moon, the sun, and the earth and how they're aligned with the gravitational pull. And most of those spots, yeah, they are out in Atlantic Canada. I was actually out there last week. I was in PEI, and yes, very gusty conditions, but very beautiful as well. Now, back here at home, let's take a look at this. Our peak wind gusts from Wednesday. Was a garbage day for you yesterday? Because it was for me. And yeah, everything was everywhere. Take a look at this. Places like Kitchener, around 74 kilometers an hour. That was the peak wind gust. Even higher out towards Kingston, looking at 80 there. Now, today, we will be seeing a similar setup. We see those winds out of the west, and this is what could be bringing, again, that lake effect rain as it pushes over the Georgian Bay. So anywhere north of Barrie could be getting into some of those light showers. Now, I want to take you out to Kevin Yard and find out where he was doing earlier today. checking out the fall colors. That is the perfect plan for Thanksgiving long weekend. Weather is going to be great Saturday, Sunday evening into Monday. That's when we're going to be getting into some rain. But okay, for this evening, again, we see some of the rain icons up here, and that's again just because of that lake effect rain down more towards the south, cooler weather, but we are staying dry. In our meeting this morning, our meteorological briefing, let's say, we were saying welcome to fall throughout southern Ontario. Yep, it's coming. 10 degrees this evening for Toronto. Stay with us. Your locals coming up. Well, I'm glad you're here. Thanks for tuning into the Weather Network. We are talking about some pretty important things. Winds dominant across Canada. We'll tell you more about that coming up. Hurricane season, it's the weakest in decades for the Atlantic coast. We're going to break that down, as well as Thanksgiving weekend forecast. But first, let's take you into Oakville, a little further east into Kingston. Look at that, 80 kilometers an hour. It was a very gusty day. Today will be similar, not as strong for some areas, but again, we can see some of those reds popping up on the map. That's wind gusts, sustained winds as well. That could be around 60 kilometers an hour. Gust happens for a period of time. Sustained is that constant wind. Now, as we take a look as well with the strong winds west over the Georgian Bay, that's when we could be getting into some lake effect rain. So north of Barrie, getting into those showers. Now, let's take it into the Atlantic provinces, into Newfoundland. Watch this driving trip throughout the Maritime provinces. Didn't make it to Nova Scotia, but I was in New Brunswick and PEI. Gorgeous, gorgeous colors for the fall. Now, back to business. Storm surge warning. That's happening now as well along the shores of the St. Lawrence. I actually was in a ferry going from St. Simeon down towards Rivière-du-Loup. Last week, calm conditions. This week could be a little different. Higher waters. We could be seeing strong waves as well. King tides are in place throughout New Brunswick and Nova Scotia. King tides, the highest possible tide. So yes, some very rough waters. Now, let's jump into this. The 2014 Atlantic Canada hurricanes. This is how many could have happened, but look at this. We're only on to E. Edouard is done, so it's a very slim season for Atlantic hurricanes. Let's recap. Take a look at this. So in 2014, we've seen 5 so far. In past years, 2013, 14, the average is about 10. So yes, we are looking at a very quiet season in terms of the hurricane season out in the Atlantic. Of course, we started off very strong with Arthur, but since then we haven't been seeing too much in the way of, let's say, active weather, hurricane weather out there. Now, current systems, of course, we have that rain happening throughout Newfoundland and also along the BC coast. Lots of rain headed for the weekend for you in BC. Moves in Friday, warmer weather across the prairies, and rain moves into southern Ontario. Well, that's a great smile right there. Thanks so much for that, Kim. And of course, your videos could be featured. Just send them in to the Weather Network. Now, let's focus in on Hamilton this evening. 9 degrees, some cloud cover builds in, yes, but overall, fairly nice day. The winds, though, very strong winds yesterday throughout the day. Today, westerly winds, and they could be creating some rain, lake effect rain, as they move over the Georgian Bay. So we are looking at less than 10 millimeters of rain. Let's say north of Barrie, stretching over in towards Ottawa. Kingston could also be getting into the wet stuff as well throughout the day today. Take a look at these sustained winds. These are not gusts. Gusts could be even more than this. So we are seeing around that 20, 40, 60 kilometer an hour range. So yes, breezy conditions. If it was garbage day for you yesterday or today, you'll know what I mean. Now let's take a look at this video out of Trenton. Pretty interesting here. All right, some great footage there. And yes, the #1 spot, the water spout, that's what we could be seeing today. More likely through the morning hours rather now than in towards the afternoon, evening. But overall, we are seeing a risk of that along the Great Lakes throughout the day today.